Hi there, my name is Remy Okubanjo, and welcome to the Esthio Exchange. Today, we will be continuing our series on the Women of the Bible in honor of Women's History Month in March 2026. And the next characters we will be delving into are really Deborah, and we can't talk about Deborah without talking about Jael. Jael, I think that's how you pronounce her name. So these are the two female characters that we will be studying and gleaning from them, and hopefully we can see ourselves in them or learn something from them. So for some context, this was in the time of Judges. If you haven't read the story, you can find the story in Judges 4 and 5. So, this had been through periods of the Israelites living their own lives, forgetting about God for decades. The Israelites again coming and begging, and then God giving them judges, right? And in this time, Deborah was one of the judges, the only female judge in the Bible, by the way. Um, and she was given as a judge after 20 years of God being distant from the Israelites. So after 20 years of the Israelites crying out to God to please have mercy, and God, we want you back, and God, we're sorry, like they usually do, like we all do, to be honest. Um, God gave them Deborah. And we're introduced to Deborah as with these titles. We're told that Deborah was a prophetess, she was a judge, and she was also the wife of a man called Lapidoth. That's the only time we see that name in the Bible. He's not talked about any other time besides the fact that he is Deborah's husband. So that's a big deal. That's the only time he's mentioned because of his wife, Deborah. So she had many responsibilities. And as usual, I like to research the names of these characters that we're going through. And Deborah means bee. So we could say she was quite the busy bee because she had several responsibilities, juggling the role of a judge, which was a big deal. It was like sort of like being a president, like a king, like was a big responsibility. She had to be at the city gates every day, people coming to her for counsel on different issues. So she was quite busy. And she was also a prophetess. So spiritually too, she was quite active. And she was a wife. It was very much clear that she had responsibilities at home too. So I would say she was the ultimate busy bee. And I would say she's like the real queen bee. Beehives don't come for me. She was the real queen bee. But yeah, so that's that about Deborah. But then there was this other character called Barak. He was one of the leaders of the army of Israel. At this point in time, the Israelites were living under oppression from a king called Jabin. We were told that he had steel chariots, not just regular chariots, but steel chariots. Still then was like it was a major weapon of warfare. Like, so this instilled a lot of fear in the Israelites at this point in time. And nobody was trying to go against this Jabin that was oppressing the Israelites because everybody was scared. Even though they had God back with them, it seemed they didn't trust God enough to go to war against this king Jabin. But Deborah, a woman, actually called and rallied the army of Israel. She called to Barak and she said, as in God said, because she's a prophetess too, so she was able to speak without authority, that spiritual authority as well. She said, hasn't God said, pretty much, God had already told the Israelites to go to war, but they were too scared. But she said, I, Deborah, arise as a mother of Israel. And she called Barak, not Barack Obama, she called Barak to rally the military of Israel to go to war. And Barak responded in a very interesting manner. He said, in response to Deborah, that he wouldn't go unless she went with him. And that reminds me of the conversation between, God and Moses, when God called Moses to go out to deliver the Israelites, and Moses kept finding excuses. Oh, I stutter. Oh, am I? Oh, I already murdered someone. Oh, they're not going to listen to me, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, Moses did say that if he goes, he will only go if God goes with him. So in a similar way, Barak, a man at that, told a woman that he wouldn't go to war unless she went with him. I think because he saw the God in her. I mean, we're told that she's a prophetess. So he saw the God in her, and he wanted that God in her to be with them when they went to war. She said, okay, I'll go with you. But no, that the head of the army they were fighting at that point in time, Sisera would be given into the hands of a woman. So they go on to war, and then this Sisera character flees, and he finds himself in a tent or in front of a tent of a woman called Jael, who is the wife of the king in that town. I don't remember the name of the town, but that town was actually was actually at peace with, this with these other rulership that the Israelites were trying to defeat. So Sisera's people were at peace with Yahel's people. So she told the Sisera character, like, hey, come into my tent. Let me put, you're probably tired. Let me give you some milk and, rest your head. And I think she gave goat milk. Oh, also, I did research the meaning of the name Yael, and the first meaning that popped up was wild goats. I'll try to unpack what I think this means, but it was the name of Yael means wild goats, but it also could mean a resolute woman. I don't know, but the first meaning of Yael is wild goats. But anyways, she welcomes him, and then we're told that Yael was a woman that dwells in a tent, like a homemaker, right? So she welcomes him, she gives him some milk. We put him to sleep because milk is heavy. And as he slept, she covered him with a blanket, made him really comfortable. We're told that she took a 10 pegs, and drove the peg through his head down to the ground. A woman did that. Many women, I don't think, will have the guts to even run something like that through someone's skull. But remember, we were told that she's named Wild Goats. But I think there must have been something wild about Yael that gave her that audacity, that courage to like just drive that peg through his head. And that's how the Israelites defeated this army. And they were able to live at peace for 40 years after because of Yael, because of Yael's courage. And in Judges 5, Deborah and Barak write a song about the victory and how everything happened. And something of note there was that Deborah mentioned that there had been no life in the villages amongst the Israelites. There was no life. But that Deborah, arose as a mother of Israel. She said, I arose. She saw a gap. She saw a need. And she arose. So let's unpack a little bit about these characters, Deborah and Yael. Let's start with Deborah. So Deborah must have been a very commendable woman. For her to have been named judge, the only female judge, that's like a king, like a president, right? Especially in those times, that was a really, really, really big deal. And she was a wife. So she had responsibilities at home as well. And she was also a prophetess. So that means spiritually, she was also on top of things. So she was in the marketplace, she was in the church, and also she ended up leading the army of Israel, getting them to arise. She ended up rallying a group of men because the armies were only comprised of men. Women didn't used to fight in wars, but she went along with them in a war. I mean, that says a lot about Deborah. She was courageous. And the fact that it's not a woman's place to rally an army to go to war, judge or not. It's just not a woman's place, especially in those times. And when Baraki said, oh, I won't go unless you go, she did not tell Barak, it's your job to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. It's your job. That's a man's job. She didn't do that. In the first episode when we talk about Eve, I talked about the fact that God created men and women to be interdependent, to have a partnership, to collaborate. That's the way both can find success, right? And I feel like there are times where we get so caught up in these roles, not to say that men should not do what they're supposed to do. They should absolutely do what they're supposed to do. But I feel like sometimes we get so caught up with we don't allow the spirit to just lead us to get things done because we're so caught up in what a man should do and what a woman should do. I'm not saying we should go and try to step on every man's toes and try to do what every man does. No, but I'm saying there'll be a time, especially when there's their need. Remember also, as women, we're called to be Ezeers, and we established that to be an Ezer. A helper is not just being a helpmate. It's not just helping with the things at home. To be an Ezer is also like to provide military aid, which Deborah did. She did provide military aid, right? And people don't need military aid if there's no war, right? So women are really called to be Ezers, especially in times of war, in times of warfare, physical warfare, spiritual warfare. There was actually need for them to go to war physically. And she arose, she said, as a mother of Israel. She arose as a mother of Israel because she saw a need. She wasn't punting to say, oh, this is not my place. I've told you what God said. I've done my part. She could have just said, like, hey, God told me this as a prophetess. I've told you guys. You guys need to go to war. You guys get your act together. Figure it out. No. She arose and she told Barak, arise. She told him to arise too. She told him to arise. And even in the song, it's like she actually also had to get herself to wake up. Like in the song in Judges 5, she talked about, where it says, awake, awake, Deborah. So she also had, so it's not like it didn't take her a lot. I'm sure it took her a lot to, number one, rally the troops. And it took her a lot. She left her husband. The husband must have been like, what are you thinking? Woman did not go to war. I'm sure her husband was like, wait, what? You're going to war? So it must have taken a lot of her as well to not just rally the troops, but also go along with them to war. As a woman, she didn't have to do that, but she really stepped in to fill the gap, to be and is there for the nation of Israel, to really provide that aid, that help that the whole nation needed, because the men were not doing what they should have done, to be honest, right? But she was not, you know, laying any blame. She was not playing the blame game. She called them together in partnership, in collaboration. And when they asked of her, she did not say no. She said, okay, I'll go with it. But she did caution them and said, this victory will be given into the hands of a woman, right? But at the end of the day, it's for the whole nation of Israel. And Jael was not even an Israelite, to even make things more interesting. She was a foreigner. She was a tent dweller. Tent dwellers lived very nomadic lives. They didn't stay in one place. So she didn't even have to help the Israelites. Speaking about Jael did not have to step in to help. And Jael was living the life of a homemaker. So it must have been such an isolating life, right? She was not out there in the city, so she didn't have a lot of interaction with people out there. For so many people, for so many women, right? They might find themselves being in a season where they're really just at home, holding down the home front, and they might be feeling like, am I made for more? Is there even anything to this thing that I'm doing, staying home and keeping the home? Yael is a great example of how how we can live a purpose-filled life even where we currently find ourselves, even if we feel like there's so much money inside of us and we don't think what we're doing even matters. Also back to Yael, right? She was living the life of a tent dweller, a homemaker, keeping the home, very domestic lifestyle. And then she has this chance to actually let that wildness in her be used for good. Because she didn't have to. She could have been like, forget these people. I have nothing to gain, right? Again, thinking about the greater good, not just being self-serving, right? And she immediately identified who this person was. She knew he was the leader of the army that the Israelites were fighting against. And she thought very quickly on her feet. All the skills that she learned at home, all the skills of being a tent dweller, she didn't have to go to Harvard to learn those skills, right? Like she didn't have to have some fancy jobs, some six-figure incomes. As a woman, you have so much power, even though you're a woman who finds yourself in a season of just being at home. There's power in that too. So many skills that you learn even in that God can use for the greater good and, have you fulfill your purpose here on earth. So this is an encouragement to every woman out there who feels looked down upon for not, working a 9 to 5 or having, a business where they feel like they look down upon because all they're focused on at this point in time is the home and the kids. No, so there's so much that God can do through you and in you, even in this season. But yeah, so Yael was able to think clearly on her feet. She was very hospitable to this man because as a homemaker, those are one of the skills that you learn. She offered him some milk to, get him comfortable. The man that's at war, that's fleeing from being murdered, he got quite comfortable, drank the milk, laid his head, and was covered with a blanket. So he was all warm and cozy, and he was so comfortable. And she took that tent peg and drove it in his head. So all that wildness that she must have had on the inside of her that she hadn't found a way to, to express, right? She got an opportunity to use it for good, right? And she drove that tent back to his head, and that gave the Israelites victory where they had peace for 40 years. So many things we can learn from Deborah and Yael. Deborah was a busy bee, queen bee. She was doing a lot. But she saw a need. She didn't play the blame game. She arose as a mother of Israel and rallied. Influence. Deborah had influence. How does one rally a troop, an army troop, as a woman? Influence. And of course, the fact that she was a judge, she was obviously wise. She had a lot of wisdom, providing counsel and helping judge matters. She was intelligent. She was wise. She was in the marketplace, successful in the marketplace. So again, this is speaking to my woman in the marketplace too. Just because you're in the marketplace doesn't mean you can also be on fire for the church, right? Doesn't mean you can use your spiritual giftings, my prophetesses, right? Because you can use your spiritual giftings in the marketplace and for your nation. That's what Deborah did for Israel. It wasn't just about a church, and it wasn't just about the marketplace. It was for the nation, for the greater good. Again, women, we have influence, and we might find ourselves in different roles, being a homemaker, and being a queen bee or busy bee in the marketplace, in the home front, and the whole nine. But there's so much good that we can all do in those different roles if we're willing to partner with the men in our lives, and if we're willing to fill in the gaps and stand up when we see a gap and help find a solution when we see a gap. And I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about Deborah and Jael. So many good nuggets to get out of this. But till the next one, and bye.